Ayan had always believed that fear came from noise screams, crushes, chaos. The loud, sudden shocks that made you jump out of your skin. He was wrong. True, primal fear didn't come from noise. It came from silence. The kind of oppressive, heavy silence that suffocates everything, where even the sound of your own heartbeat feels like a betrayal. And tonight, at exactly 3:17 a.m., that silence was shattered. Knock. One single distinct knock. It wasn't on his bedroom door. It sounded like it came from the front door, echoing through the long, dark hallway of the old house. Ayan's eyes snapped open. His room was a cavern of shadows. The only light a faint, ghostly glow from his phone screen lying on the nightstand. He reached for it, his hand trembling slightly. He checked the time again, a desperate, irrational hope flickering inside him that the numbers would have changed. They hadn't. 3:17 a.m., a cold dread, sharp and familiar, snaked its way up his spine. It was the same time his grandmother used to warn him about, her voice a low, serious whisper as she tucked him in as a child. "If you ever hear something at 3:17, she used to say, her eyes wide with a conviction that chilled him even then, never, ever answer. Some doors are not meant to be opened." He swallowed hard, the sound loud in the dead quiet. He pulled his thin blanket tighter around his shoulders, as if it could shield him from whatever was out there. He held his breath, listening, waiting. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was the house settling. Then came the second knock. Knock, knock, not hurried, not angry. Each knock was deliberate, patient, as if whoever or whatever stood on the other side of his front door had all the time in the world. It was a patience that felt predatory. The blanket was no longer a comfort. Ayan quietly, carefully, slipped out of bed. His feet touched the cold wooden floor, and a shiver ran through him that had nothing to do with the temperature. The house was too quiet. The usual hum of the refrigerator was gone. The old grandfather clock in the living room had stopped ticking. Even the neighborhood dogs, who barked at every passing car, had fallen silent. It was as if the entire world was holding its breath with him. He took a tentative step out of his room, and that's when it happened. The hallway light, a single bare bulb he always left off, flickered on by itself, casting long, distorted shadows that danced like specters on the walls. At that exact moment, his phone vibrated against his palm, the sudden buzz making him almost drop it. He looked down at the screen. Unknown number. His heart dropped into his stomach. A new message popped up. 2 words. "You're awake." His blood ran cold. He couldn't breathe. His fingers, now shaking uncontrollably, fumbled over the screen as he typed a reply. "Who is this?" He hit send. The reply was instantaneous, as if the sender was just waiting for him to ask. "I'm at the door." A wave of pure terror washed over him. Against every instinct screaming at him to run and hide, a morbid curiosity pulled him forward. He had to see. He had to know. He crept down the hallway, each footstep a thunderous announcement of his presence. He reached the living room, his eyes fixed on the front door. It stood there, dark and imposing. But the deadbolt was still thrown. The chain was still on. He leaned closer, peering at the sliver of space at the bottom. No shadow, no light from the outside porch. He pressed his ear against the cold wood. No sound, nothing. A small, shaky wave of relief washed over him. It was a prank. A sick, twisted prank. Or maybe he was just losing his mind. Then, knock. The sound was sharp, close, not from the door in front of him. It came from the wall right behind him. He spun around, his heart leaping into his throat. He was staring at the solid plaster wall that separated the living room from the kitchen. The knocking moved again, this time from the ceiling directly above his head, then the floor beneath his feet. It was everywhere. It was nowhere. It was inside the house with him. His phone buzzed once more, the light illuminating his terrified face. I told you not to forget me. Forget who? Ayan's breathing grew heavy, ragged. This isn't real, he whispered to the empty room, his voice a fragile thread. I'm dreaming. I have to be dreaming. His frantic eyes darted around the room, searching for something, anything, to ground him in reality. They landed on the large, ornate mirror hanging near the shoe rack by the entrance. At first, everything looked normal. His own reflection stared back at him pale, wide-eyed, terrified. Then the reflection moved. While the real Ayan stood frozen in horror, the reflection of Ayan began to smile. It was a slow, unnatural, chilling grin that stretched its lips too wide. The eyes in the mirror were not his own. They were cold, ancient, and filled with a triumphant malice. The reflected Ayan raised a hand and knocked. Knock, knock. The sound came from inside the mirror. A scream tore from Ayan's throat. He scrambled backward, falling over a rug, and then scrambled to his feet, running blindly back to his room. He slammed the door shut, fumbling with the lock until he heard the click. He backed away from the door, his body hitting his bed, and he collapsed onto it. His heart pounding so hard, felt like it would burst from his chest. His phone, which he'd somehow managed to hold onto, lit up again with a new message. You promised I could stay. And suddenly, the floodgates of his memory burst open. Not just a trickle, but a tidal wave of forgotten moments washed over him. A childhood illness. A sterile, white hospital room. The relentless rhythmic beeping of machines in the dead of night. A mirror placed beside his bed. And a doctor's voice, distant and muffled, as if coming from a great distance. He survived. But it was a close call. Only one of them could. One of them? With a dawning, soul-crushing horror, Ayan slowly lifted his head and looked at the full-length mirror attached to his own wardrobe. His reflection was no longer copying him. While he was huddled in terror on the edge of his bed, the reflection was sitting calmly in the middle of the reflected bed, waiting, watching him. And that's when the truth, cold and sharp as ice, pierced through him. The terrible, impossible truth. He wasn't the original. Years ago, in that hospital room, at exactly 3:17 a.m., something had followed him back from the edge of death. Something that looked like him, that wore his face, that slipped into his life, while the real Ayan was left behind, trapped on the other side. And all this time, he had been the intruder, the copy, the reflection, and now the real one was knocking, demanding to be let back in. The thing in the mirror, the real Ayan, stood up. It walked toward the glass, its movements fluid and confident. Its cold eyes met his. It's time, it said softly, its voice his voice, but not. The mirror in his room began to crack. A single jagged line appeared, then another, spreading like a spiderweb across the glass until the entire surface shattered. The house fell completely silent once more. The next morning, Ayan's family found him asleep in his bed. He looked peaceful, his breathing even and calm. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken mirrors, no unlocked doors. Everything was just as it should be. But from that night on, something about Ayan was different. A subtle change his family couldn't quite place. He seemed more distant, colder, and he never, ever looked at mirrors anymore. And every night, if you were to listen closely, at 3:17 a.m., you might hear it. A soft, patient knocking. Not on the doors, and not on the windows. But from deep inside the walls of the house, a faint, desperate sound, asking to be let back in. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next descent into the dark. Stay safe, and whatever you do, don't answer the door.